On January 27th, 1988, the Boston Celtics returned to the parquet floor of the Boston Garden to host the Washington Bullets. The Bullets entered the night with a roster that carried both interior strength and perimeter firepower. At the heart of their lineup stood future Hall of Famer Moses Malone, who controlled the paint with his rebounding physicality and scoring touch. On the wing, Jeff Malone supplied the consistent mid-range shooting that made him one of the most reliable scorers of his era. Yet, the player who turned the most heads didn't start the game. He came off the bench, a figure so unusual, so extreme in his dimensions that he seemed like he didn't quite belong to the same league. Manute Bol, at 7 feet, 7 inches tall, with an arm span that stretched out beyond 8 feet. Bol was a spectacle before he even made a play. He did not guard like other centers. Instead of relying on strength or footwork, Bol bent the geometry of the court. He erased angles that normally existed, closed windows that other players couldn't dream of contesting, and disrupted the rhythm of offenses simply by being present. When he finally checked in during the second quarter, all eyes in the Garden shifted toward him. Yet the true story of that night wasn't merely about Bol's incredible stature. It was about what happened when the towering shot blocker stood across from Larry Bird, a player already in full command of the game before Bol ever took off his warm-ups. Bird had long been known for his ability to dissect defenses, to play not at the defensive speed, but at his own. This particular game offered a perfect illustration. By the time Bol stepped on the hardwood, Bird was already dealing damage in a way that had nothing to do with brute strength. When their minutes overlapped, it became a fascinating duel. Length versus timing, height versus touch, instinct versus anticipation. Bol's arms stretched into the rafters, but Bird's game was about precision, patience, and confidence. The Celtics opened the evening with their offense flowing just as head coach K.C. Jones designed it. Movement, screens, and the ball ultimately in Larry Bird hands. On the very first trip, Robert Parrish set a firm screen to free Bird. Instead of forcing up a shot, Bird caught the pass, instantly recognized the defensive rotation, and whipped a bounce pass back to Parrish, who finished with a clean dunk. It was a subtle play that wouldn't appear on highlight reels, but it announced Bird's approach: read the floor, make the right decision, and control the game's tempo. Not long after, Bird impacted the game with pure anticipation. Moses Malone attempted to save a loose ball, but Bird had already calculated the bounce. He snatched it cleanly, turned up court, and scored on the other end with a simple layup. No flash, no theatrics, just effort and timing. These small plays were the foundation of the advantage Boston built. Then his scoring began in earnest. On one possession, he feigned using a screen, causing his defender to stumble a half step, then darted back toward the elbow for a smooth jumper. A few minutes later, he ran off a back screen, subtly bumped his man to create space, and pulled up off a single dribble for a contested shot that kissed the rim lightly before falling through. Whether balanced or fading, heavily guarded or in rhythm, Bird kept finding the bottom of the net. The transition game offered him another chance. Boston pushed after a rebound, and though Bird caught the ball while barely open and off balance, he rose without hesitation and knocked it down. His reads were happening quicker than anyone else's reactions. By then, his defender could only chase. Bird even slowed the pace to showcase his post-up skills. Dribbling deliberately, he backed his man toward the lane, then rose for a left-leaning fadeaway jumper. It was silky, practiced, and perfect. By the midpoint of the first quarter, Bird hadn't missed a shot, whether curling around screens, spotting up in the short corner, or taking advantage of mismatches on the block. Every attempt ended with the same result. When the horn signaled the end of the opening quarter, Bird had compiled 22 points on a flawless 10-for-10 shooting line, plus 2 made free throws. The second quarter marked the entrance of Manute Bol. The towering center immediately altered the complexion of the Bullets' defense. He didn't need to block a shot to make an impact. Just by standing in the paint, he forced hesitation. On one possession, Artis Gilmore hesitated under the rim in fear of Bol's reach and was whistled for a 3-second violation. That was the kind of influence Bol wielded, fear and second thoughts. But Bird was unbothered. The rhythm he had established carried into the second quarter. He screened for Parrish, then popped out to the perimeter, caught a pass in stride, and calmly buried another jumper. Moments later, the Celtics ran their familiar floppy action, with Bird curling off a baseline screen into a soft one-leg shot. Balance never wavered, and the ball dropped through the net once more. Whenever his defender sagged even slightly, Bird punished him instantly. With a toe just on the line, he rose and fired without hesitation. In the post, against smaller defenders, he turned simply over his shoulder for easy mid-range looks. By halftime, Bird had accumulated 32 points, and though Bol's length was beginning to have subtle effects, nothing slowed the Celtics star from dictating pace and tone. The third quarter began much the same. Bird curled off another screen, caught the pass, and buried a shot from the short corner. Washington turned to its interior scoring, and Bol once again showcased why he would consider the most intimidating rim protector in the league. Against Kevin McHale, Bol forced awkward angles and even drew whistles for illegal defense by lingering too long in the paint. Yet Bird kept rolling. At one point, he posted up Jeff Malone, spun to middle, absorbed a foul, and still managed to bank the shot for an and-one. A few possessions later, he stripped Jeff Malone near half court, sprinted ahead, and finished softly off the glass, despite Bol rotating late to contest. Bird wasn't just scoring. He was dictating flow on both ends of the floor. By the end of the third quarter, Bird remained the calmest, sharpest player on the court, while Bol was Washington's anchor, turning the Celtics' routine possessions into difficult tests. The fourth quarter opened with Boston leaning on its unquestioned leader. In the corner, Bird caught the ball, both feet inside the arc, and wasted no movement. He rose immediately, drained the jumper, and pushed his total to 44 points. Already more than combined scoring output of his teammates at that stage. But Washington wasn't finished. Darrell Walker attacked the rim, only to meet Bol's towering rejection. The block sparked a fast break finish by Jeff Malone, giving the Bullets hope. Moments later, Bird answered in a different way. Curling off a screen, he drew two defenders and calmly fed Parrish for an uncontested layup. Bird's passing was as lethal as his scoring. Bol produced his highlight of the night soon after. Parrish rose for a dunk attempt, and Bol met him squarely, swatting the ball clean away. It was the kind of statement play that electrified the Bullets bench and reminded everyone why he was feared at the rim. With under 2 minutes to play, Bird once again took control. Match against Bernard King, he spun into the paint, drew the foul, and knocked down both free throws with ease. Bol responded with his own contribution, sinking 2 free throws at the other end after securing a defensive rebound, trimming Boston's lead to 2. In the closing moments, the Celtics steadied themselves. Bird's presence, composure, and relentless decision-making ensured Boston never surrendered control. When the buzzer sounded, the Celtics had won 106-100. Bird's brilliance defined the night, while Bol's late-game resistance gave the contest its drama. Yet the larger message was clear. Bird's dominance wasn't merely about hot shooting. It was about complete command, seeing the game 2 steps ahead, trusting instincts, and refusing to adjust his identity even when the most intimidating shot blocker in the sport stood in his path. Bol warped spacing. Yes, he frightened drivers. Yes, but Bird dismantled every challenge with touch, timing, and confidence. That night at the Garden, the story became more than just a mid-season matchup. It was a reminder that Larry Bird's prime wasn't simply great. It was generational. And even when faced with the tallest challenge imaginable, there was no question about who dictated the outcome. On that floor, against those opponents, Larry Bird showed once again why he was the boss. That's it for the video. Guys, if you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time,